Welcome to the Leading Sustainable Success podcast. My name's Adam Campbell. In this podcast series, we'll explore key themes that help leaders to create and sustain success in their organisation. In this episode, we'll be joined by Alex Bloom to explore the embed phase of employee ownership. Good morning, Alex, and welcome to the Leading Sustainable Success podcast. Quite fittingly today, given the Olympic torch in the background, we're going to be talking about employee ownership, particularly the transition and succession from founder to MD, if you like, around that. But before we kind of dive into the topic, for those of people who are watching or seeing you for the first time, perhaps you could give a little bit of background to yourself.
Thanks, Adam. Yeah, good morning. Very happy to be here. My background started in industry, various different roles at well-known brands before making the shift into my family's business. So I joined at the point where the business would be best described as fourth generation.
Yeah.
I was working closely with my father, and he was the most active member in that part of the business. By that point, he and his cousins were running different aspects of what had been their great grandfather's enterprise, which then became the domain of four sons and then extended to cousins. So by the time I joined the family business, I had both a sense of being part of the continuation of a family business, but also really working with a founder insofar as the business that my father was running was unrecognizable to that which his great grandfather had started. So I have experience of working with in family environment and really working with a founder as well as traditional organizations. It wasn't for me, I think is the short answer. After running that business for about 5 years, I got the sense that I didn't want to be doing this for the rest of my working life. I think I took on the role at about the age of 35.
Yep.
Was quite happily doing the role until about 40, and probably subject of another podcast. But I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing when I realized I couldn't do this for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And that set about, some soul searching, some very interesting conversations with advisors and people who I trusted, and ultimately resulted in me leaving with relationships intact and finding a very happy home at Telos. And the reason was a very similar way of thinking, an outlook and perspective on business that made it feel like this would be a natural home for me for part 2 of my career.
Very good. And perhaps you could just give a little sense of, in the last 5 or 6 years, the types of organisations that you've worked with, without giving away the trade secrets, perhaps.
Yeah, I think I've worked with almost every type of business across a multiple of sectors. So we've worked with family businesses, employee-owned businesses, privately owned businesses, listed entities, PE-backed, partnerships. So really, I think I've had experience of all of them. My greatest affinity remains in the employee-owned sector and in family business. Family business is one that I'm familiar with. I've worked in it. Employee-owned was new to me. But from that first engagement in a family-owned business and with the EOA themselves, it had so many parallels that's where I enjoy myself the most. I can recognize and appreciate those challenges, and the nature of those projects have covered everything from strategic alignment, strategic definition, cultural reviews and refreshes, working with key individuals and teams to enhance and improve performance, as well as supporting businesses as they make the transition from one ownership structure through to employee ownership.
Excellent. That's what we're going to focus in and zooming a little bit today, Alex, particularly looking through the eyes of that next generation of leaders who are kind of taking on the mantle from the founder, the baton or the torch, to get it back to the Olympic analogy. But then also dealing with that transition to an employee ownership culture as well. So we'll do that. Before we kind of go into the specifics of questions relating to that, though, a question that I'm asking everyone that's coming on this podcast, and I'll do the same for you. What does leading sustainable success mean to you?
Long term, thinking long term, planning long term, acting, with the long term in mind. So it's not about ignoring the short term. We know how important it is to ensure that you have a short term, otherwise you'll never get to the long term. But it really is about, if we look from a leadership perspective, which is where I suppose I have my greatest interest, it's about understanding that your responsibilities extend beyond your tenure. It's about understanding that you play an active role in creating a future where even your successor may not be part of that business. And it's, a core part of that is being prepared to think about your own succession. And it still amazes me that some individuals, some organizations can't quite come to grips with that. But it is an understanding and an appreciation that this business should be in a better state when you step away from it. Any individual steps away from it from when you started.
Excellent. So a great summary, I think, there at the end, Alex. Leaving somewhere in a better place that you found it. So excellent. And bringing that kind of connection to employee ownership. What is employee ownership to you, and how do you see it kind of contributing to that sustainable success of organisation?
We need to recognize employee ownership is in many ways simply an ownership model. So just by transitioning to employee ownership doesn't guarantee success, and quite often, sadly, there is misplaced optimism or misplaced interpretation, understanding by some founders or owners who are selling their business that simply by transitioning to employee ownership, we've done our part. The business will continue. In many ways, it does, but more often than not, that drive for a legacy, the drive for the business to continue, that's what starts the thought process. What we're talking about is a model which I believe strongly and passionately, done well, will enable a business to build on where it is, and flourish. You have a structure, you have a mentality, which means that you can tap into your employee owners, but they have to understand what that means. They have to understand what we refer to as their, not only the rewards, but their responsibilities, and the opportunities. You have a trust who you can draw on, who are there to ensure that from a legal perspective, the business is being run in the best long-term interests of its beneficiaries, the employees. But again, simply setting up that legal structure, simply saying we're employee owned, is not enough. People have to really understand what that means. And if you can do the heavy work, the lifting, the thinking, the planning, the engagement around that, which, that doesn't, it doesn't have to be difficult, but you need to get it done in the right order, then you have got, I think, a wonderful opportunity to step back as a founder and say, my business is in good hands. I will now be able to walk away proud not only of what I have achieved, but proud of what I have created, and confident that it will continue and endure.
Excellent. And maybe some of those things we'll dive into a little bit more as the conversation goes on. The last podcast in employee ownership was with Jeremy, looked at kind of what the phase that we call transition. So we talk about transition, embed, and grow and renew as phases of employee ownership that we get to work with organisations. The transition stage, much more working with the founder. The embed stage, much more working with the kind of the new leadership team. Do you want to say a little bit more about the embed phase, if you like? So once a business has transitioned, the transaction has taken place successfully. What are typically the things that the new leadership team are having to deal with and do in that phase? You know, how long does it last?
Yeah, I mean, so we're really talking, as you said, this is the ownership has been transferred in a legal sense. So that's out the way. All of the complexity, soul searching that may go on with that is done. Aspects of the embed stage possibly do start, however, during that, because you have the opportunity at that earlier stage, at that transition phase, to do some of the thinking for founders, for those who are selling to the trust, to put in place their wants, their hopes, their desires for the business. But what we're really talking about is that point where those founders, the sellers, the vendors, um, have decided whether they're still involved or they're not going to be involved, or to what extent they're going to be involved. Them learning that if they are involved, they're no longer the sole owners, they are alongside colleagues who have equal ownership. And it's about navigating those changes in dynamics, that new team coming together, or the same team with a different mindset, thinking about how do we take the best of employee ownership, the best of who we are and what we are, to ensure our future. So it requires thinking, it requires experimenting, I would suggest, and it requires a commitment to the ownership model. And when I say a commitment to the ownership model, it means committing to certain behaviours, some of which I would say in the majority of instances are absent. So a greater level of transparency. Transparency is not normally something that you would use to describe a founder-led business.
No.
That's just not the way they operate. So you're talking about new behaviors being introduced, but that embed phase can continue all the way to the successor of that,
Yeah.
of the founder, or even
Yeah.
the successor's successor. You could be in an embed phase for quite a period of time. That's not because you've failed to do it, but I don't think you can put a stopwatch on it and say, right, we have now entered
Yeah.
month one of a 12-month embed phase.
Yeah.
Um, I think that we have worked with businesses who are still embedding in year three, year four.
Yeah.
And it's also a function of when vendor debt is repaid.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there is still a point in change there. I think that embed probably um, you know, comes to an end around that point as well.
Yeah, I think the way I like to think of it, if the transition phase is the kind of much more dealing with the ownership succession, so the business is now owned differently. The embed phase is almost dealing with that leadership succession, isn't it? So
Yeah, it's
you've often got a founder still around, maybe still playing a role in the business, still having a strong influence over decision making because for 20 years that's the habit that they've had. They've thought about the business 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and now the business is quite often having to find new ways of making decisions and take on that mantle.
yeah, I think you're right. It is about leadership. It is a way of operating. And I think the other
Yeah.
thing I would say about embed is that it will, more often than not, I think it looks very different from one business to another. If I recall from your conversation with Jeremy, you spoke about, when you've seen, one employee ownership transition, you've seen one employee ownership transition. I think the
We've
embed
seen
phase will
30
look,
plus of those now.
yeah, so exactly. So, we can draw on the experience. they have the same core ingredients for success, but each one will look different because you're dealing with different individuals, different personalities, different commercial challenges facing that business. But you are talking about, as you said, uh, succession. You're talking about differences in approach and evolution of mindsets and behaviors so that you have, ostensibly a new entity, but one that really honors its past, but not held back by it.
Excellent, excellent, yeah, excellent. So, very good. Well, I'd like to move the conversation on to kind of the looking at this through the lens of the next generation of founders, of leaders, not taking on from the founders. Quite often, the managing director is appointed. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes a team's kind of taking on a collective type role. But do you want to talk a little bit about the leadership, the MD, if you like, kind of who is now taking on the mantle? What are some of the challenges that you see them facing as they take on that role as we move from transition to embed?
So, yeah, very happy to. For the purpose of today's conversation, the time available, I'm going to go on the basis that we're talking about leaders who are going to come up through the organization. So they
Yeah,
already have an awareness and understanding. They have relationships with the founder. They have peers who they have, known for a period of time, and for whom they have no doubt some certain credibility already established.
and that
What you're
seems
talking
very common from the
Yeah,
experience.
but I think that is the majority of it. I think there are different challenges, different opportunities possibly if you come externally, and we know of, we do know of situations where, as you said, the transition marks a point where someone else will come in and they take on the business. But that's probably a subject for another day. If we talk about the changes in someone stepping up or stepping out of the founder's shadow, it it can be challenging.
Yeah,
I think it can be challenging not only for the successor but for the founder. You could have quite successfully been even the number two to that founder, or you could have worked with them from week one, month one. You can have the confidence and credibility amongst everyone in the business, but this is a different role. You can't underestimate the changes that will come simply by a change in title. There's expectations on you. There's a different credibility that is required, and also as because we if we focus primarily on that first succession
yeah,
as opposed to subsequent successions, the business and all of the individuals are going through huge amounts of change.
yeah,
Some of those other people could have worked with that founder for a decade, decades. They will
yeah,
have known no different. They will have turned up to the same place of work, doing the same kind of work, and always known an individual running that business.
yeah.
All of a sudden, that
I'm a, I'm
there's
a,
a
I'm an employee. What?
change. I'm an employee owner, and what do you mean I can't ask Robert? Robert makes the decisions. You've got, as the MD, you have a responsibility, I suppose, to educate yourself, to educate others, to help people relearn. I mean, how many times have we get told it's easy to learn something? Well, depending on your age, it's easy
Mm,
to learn something. It's far more difficult to unlearn it and then learn something different. And in many ways, that's what you're asking people to do. So as the MD, you've got to stay ahead of that curve. You've got to ensure you are educated, others are educated. You've got to establish relationships or establish a different type of relationships. Peers become direct reports. People you've worked with for a long time may be in a trust, maybe on the trust board, and you need to establish a different type of relationship with them. And that is all related to the EO element. That
yeah,
ignores everything that can come with becoming a new CEO, the sense
yeah,
of isolation, the need to create different boundaries with individuals. And I suppose, therefore, one of the things is to remain focused, certainly from an employee ownership perspective, about the opportunities available from this model,
Yeah.
and creating a situation where it enables you to achieve greater success, as opposed to getting in the way
Yeah.
of moving the business forward. We have sadly seen too many instances where it overcomplicates, it
Yeah.
confuses, and it stops the MD from having the success which they have the capability of
Yeah.
achieving because of the confusion.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And as you were talking, I was reminded of something someone else was saying to me the other day, a client, talking about how their director team had spent only 18 months, 2 years into the transition, got used to their new director role, and are only just getting the headspace to now get their head around the employee ownership culture stuff. So there's a lot of change going on, I guess, at that time, as you say.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm curious to kind of lean in a little bit, Alex, to kind of the things that kind of work. So, where do you see these new CEOs, new MDs, new leadership teams making progress and navigating those challenges? What have you seen them do?
you need to be proactive. Nothing happens by chance. Um, it requires really good conversations, adult to adult conversations, planning in advance of that moment. So, for instance, the founder may be primarily preoccupied with the transactional element. I would be encouraging the MDs to be having conversations with the founder and others about the succession, the plan, the how everything will look and feel from whatever day, the day one, whenever that may be. So I think it requires time, um, to educate, to reflect, to come together. So if you have a new team, I suppose the new leader in many ways will have a new team because they haven't had that team if they're used to working
Yeah,
with them. But you need, as you mentioned, you need time together. Um, I think it's about agreeing and understanding what the trust board relationship will look like from a governance perspective, agreeing and understanding how transition will work with the founder. Because again,
yeah,
as we've touched on before, the founder may be in the role formally, still in a certain capacity, maybe around the business, still coming in, still have their own office. And it's about
still
agreeing.
having the odd conversation with Bob and Emma on the
Exactly.
shop floor. Yeah,
So agreeing what both sides, what they both need and want. So what does the founder need and want to feel comfortable, to feel able to hand over some of their responsibilities? What does the new leader need and want from them? Because don't get me wrong, founders are a font of knowledge. They have got relationships, and wisdom. It's about understanding how do you tap into that. So
yeah.
depending
How
on
do you
where
pull
you
on them?
are as
Yeah,
depending on where you are as a leader, as the person stepping up, I mean, in this instance, I'm talking about the MD. We can come to the team in a moment. It's also about getting comfortable having conversations that you're just not used to having.
yeah,
It's not a weakness to be asking the founder certain questions, about demonstrating the curiosity to ask questions which you've been aware of but never been directly involved in because of the relationship with the founder. And again, for the founder to feel comfortable and able to speak. So you need a bit of time with that, depending again on your skills of leadership. Um, it's about equipping yourselves with the skills, and this also goes for the team as well, equipping yourselves not only with the mindset but the practical skills, that the toolkit to have different conversations, to work differently.
yeah,
Delegation is probably going to be required in a greater way than ever before. Decision making will fall to a different group of individuals. You need to know how you will navigate that. Um, Tough conversations, which in many instances either the founders always used to do or the founders
yeah,
never did.
yeah.
But there will be a time and a place where that leader, the MD, the senior team, however big or small it may be, need to start to become comfortable with those things, and recognize that they won't just get there overnight. You can't compare, a new MD cannot compare themselves
No.
to the founder at the point at which they're handing the business over. That
Yeah.
they need to remember where they need to understand where that MD was almost at the start, where that founder was, that
Yeah.
leader. It's an unfair comparison for themselves and for others, but it doesn't mean you don't have a responsibility as the leader to equip yourselves,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
equip your self as an individual team with the skills that are required.
Yeah. Very important to authentically lead as yourself, but also the business might need different things to what it had required previously. So
Absolutely. You need to build that self-awareness so that you can create a development plan for yourself. You don't want that imposed on you. You don't want someone else saying this is what you need. You need to understand what your leadership is going to be. What do you want to achieve for the business? If we go back to, your first question about sustainable success, it's about what is it that you want to achieve in your period as the CEO, as a senior team, including your own succession.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, as you were talking there, Alex, the kind of the great EO framework that we created with the Employee Ownership Association came to mind. Clarity of role is absolutely clear. What's the role of the founder, the new leadership team, the trust board, and all of that. As a different approach, a much more consensual, well, not collaborative approach that aligns with kind of ownership seems to be important there. And then focusing on the right questions that the business needs to, actions that are going to improve the business to deliver the results that you want as owners. So a holistic kind of approach. What are you seeing of those leadership teams? Because there's a huge amount of opportunity for distraction, as you said. How do you kind of put the business front and center in that phase? Because that's the golden goose, isn't it? Really, we want to feed it in her as opposed to kill it off. So how do you see um, teams, leaders making sure the employee ownership is an enabler of success rather than a distraction or a hindrance?
So first off, I would say that it's about that understanding between the MD, the CEO, and the team that this is going to be a joint effort. Okay, whereas you may have come from a point where the founder, there was command and control. They made almost all of the decisions, even if they engaged others to a certain extent. This is a team effort, but it doesn't take anything away from ultimately, the MD is probably going to be responsible for making the call. So I think it's about that group of individuals starting to develop the mindset, develop the skills to be able to form and work in that way. I think that you also have the opportunity for that group of individuals to think about what they need as individuals, only as a team. I think you need to remember that a team is made up of individuals. Some of those individuals that I've observed over times, the most unlikely individuals have found the transition, you know, uh, really straightforward and have blossomed immediately. Whereas others have really suffered for one reason or another. And unless you have someone who is able to have that conversation with each of the individuals, you are probably capping your ability. You
Yeah,
are getting in the way. So I think it is important, and that doesn't all fall to the MD, but for the MD to be thinking, what do we need to start those conversations? As you just said, ask those questions. What is it that we need? Do we need a team charter, which may seem like overkill in year three to have something that, as such, is up on the wall, reminding people what are the behaviors we need to model? What is our mindset? What is our areas of focus? But you have to make things front of mind, and
yeah,
different leaders will find their own ways of doing that. It will be about getting together, getting everyone together out of the office month to month and just sense checking and reminding others maybe far more fluid, taking it every day as it comes, but just having that front of mind. But you have to, these are new habits.
Yeah.
And everything we have learned now about habits means that you need to start small and you need
Yeah.
to constantly be reinforcing that. So for you to be able to perform as a leader, for your team to be able to perform, I think it is being realistic, but being really clear about where do you want to go to? Where are you heading?
Yeah.
And that needs to be influenced by the purpose of the business. So what it's not, the MD and the SLT are coming into something that has been created. So
Yeah.
it's not losing sight of that, saying, okay, so where are we heading? This is our purpose.
Yeah.
What are we going to do to enable us to get there? And I think the other thing done rarely, sadly, but I think is really important and sets those apart from, sets those that succeed more quickly than others apart is really effective relationships with key stakeholder groups. So whatever
Yeah.
you create for employee voice or employee base, and also the trust board.
Yeah.
The trust board normally, I think there's confusion leads to some kind of adversarial
Yeah.
relationship, but I think it's a wonderful resource. These are people who either know the business, know an industry, know employee ownership, but they've
Yeah.
got something to offer. So it's not like a parent-child relationship. Go and have a conversation with them.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I've said to an MD, have you had that conversation with your chair of trustees or one of the trustees? Like, oh, I didn't really think I could do that. I said, it's a resource. They want you to succeed.
Yeah.
Ask them,
Yeah.
speak to them.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, I'm smiling because I'm thinking of numerous examples where that exists, and the difference that happens when you've got that right relationship between those things. Alex, I think that's an appropriate point for perhaps you've kind of almost hinted at some of this stuff, but what, where are we working with people? What are we doing with people at this stage? What are we being asked to help and support them with? So, in this embed phase of employee ownership, what are we doing to help?
It all starts with our relationship with the new leader, the spark, the catalyst for what will come next. And first and foremost, it comes down to providing that individual with the space to think and speak. So I think more often than not, we're starting as a sounding board.
Yeah.
And sometimes the relationship will continue in that on that basis. We are the safe space as an individual comes to terms with all the different changes
Yeah.
around them. People that you used to really speak freely with, you can't quite have that same conversation. You may have always bounced ideas off a founder who's no longer evolved or is now on a different agenda. You may have bounced ideas off a colleague who you've worked with for decades, but they're now a direct report, and although you've got a great relationship with them, it's not so easy. So to start off with, it's I would say that's the magic, the magic dust. From that, it's about meeting that leader where it is. So it's not about an exact playbook. Congratulations, here's what you need to do week one, here's how we'll support you month two. uh, it's about helping that leader to understand, ideally ahead of the point. So working with them, who are the stakeholders they need to engage? Where are we? What are my
Yeah.
expectations? So that understanding, that awareness, to then say, okay, well, we can support you at all different stages, not only all different stages of employee ownership, but all of the different challenges. So are you lacking a clear plan? Would you benefit from spending some time, and depending on your skills, with some support to really work with your team to define what is our plan? And I use
Yeah.
plan in the broader
Yeah. Yeah.
sense. Um, is it more so about team engagement? It's about helping re-establish and establish relationships. This group of individuals have come together. There was one business I worked with recently. People had been in the business together. I think the shortest relationship was 7 or 8 years, but they'd never
Right.
really worked together as a team.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's about learning to work together
yeah,
as a team? Is that what, is that the greatest challenge? Is that what is getting in your way? Is it about engagement? Is it learning to work with your business, all of your employees, in a very different way?
yeah,
Is it about resetting certain expectations? So here are the values that we have. We're
yeah,
very proud of. We honor those. But what are the behaviors that underpin that?
yeah,
What are we going to need to do to honor that, to bring those values to life and to help us achieve
yeah,
our commercial, our business plans? So it's about meeting that individual. That's the one-to-one support. More broadly, and over the past couple of years, we're now starting to provide that environment where an MD and others, but in this instance, let's focus on the MDs, can just sit in a room, on a screen in person and chat to others in a safe
yeah,
space, Chatham House rules, and just say, here's my problem. What can I have? I think I benefited from this when I was the managing director, and I love to see the benefit that others are getting from this Connect service that we have. Our experience, our insights are based on the projects, the conversations that we have with many businesses, and it's wonderful to be able to provide an environment where those MDs can have those conversations directly. So it isn't
yeah,
about us saying, "Oh, that reminds
yeah.
me of a situation," or "Oh, I can't,"
Oh yeah.
someone
Why
can
don't
actually
you
see,
speak to Ed?
"Oh, yeah, oh, that's what happened for Jim. That's what happened to Charlie." Uh,
Yeah,
they're walking away because they've just heard Jim and Charlie tell them. And then they
yeah,
also can pick up the phone to Jim and Charlie and say, "Listen,
yeah,
can you just remind me, or can we have another conversation?" So it's been lovely to create that community and for that community to be supporting one another. So, it's that structured support and advice that we can give, very
yeah.
tailored. And then it's about creating a space for others to have, to have some of those conversations.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, so all starting with that leader and helping them solve the problems that they need to solve in their business, whether that be strategy and a plan, the cultural change, or the engagement, or um, uh, we've got some headwinds to face, or we've got an exciting opportunity. So
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I overlooked it, but I touched on it before. It's also the toolkit.
yeah,
Some individuals, some businesses, some people are really good at delegating, about empowering, about you know, tough conversations, feedback. More often than not, though, that isn't the case.
yeah,
Um, and the best businesses face into that and say, okay, we're going to have to learn how to do this. And again, it's not just about the MD, it's not necessarily only about the senior team, it's about everyone else
yeah.
understanding that
Okay,
you need to have adult to adult conversations.
yeah. Okay, that's really helpful for me. It's got a kind of real strong sense of this embed phase then really being about supporting this leadership succession so the new leadership team are confident and capable of leading an employee owned business in the way that they need to leave it in a better place, as you put earlier, but also to bring to life the benefits and the best practice of employee ownership.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Um, so just to kind of finish and close then, Alex, based upon all of that experience that we've gained from working with 130 odd businesses and specifically looking at this embed phase, what one bit of advice would you give to an MD taking on that role to really maximize and unlock the benefits of employee ownership during the embed phase?
So if we're going to bring it down to one,
Yeah,
which there
I know
are,
it's a
then
challenge.
it is a challenge. But I think it comes that draw on the insights and experiences of others.
Okay.
And that isn't a sales pitch for everyone to start working with Telos, although contact details are available.
Yeah, I guess there are other brands of others, I guess,
No,
not
but
just
but but
Telos.
I don't even mean that. I mean draw on the founder, draw on your trust board, draw on others who have been there, draw on your employees. And that can look differently. Sometimes that's best done as one-to-one conversations. Sometimes that'd be focus groups. Sometimes that's just an ad hoc phone call. Let's go old school. Just have a chat with someone. But I think it is about being brave enough, demonstrating curiosity, the humility that is required to have a really good conversation where you are listening, ask other people, and then make your decisions. You
Yeah,
don't have to have all of the answers on day one. You probably don't have to have all of the answers anyway. Certainly not an employee owned environment. You need to be speaking to others. And that may at times be professional advisors, legal, financial, change management. But I'm just saying, just don't forget that you can speak to other people,
yeah,
spend time with those people, speak to others that have been there and done it, and engage with your employees.
excellent, Alex. I think that message of draw on the wisdom of the crowd is a fantastic place to leave it. So, Alex, thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Adam. Very enjoyable. Thank you very much.